Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I feel a little guilty about being introduced and then making all of you stop your great conversations. You had a real buzz going on here. Now you have to listen to a university president this early in the morning. I give you a lot of credit for showing up so early and to agree to listen to me this early. When they asked me to do this, they said it's at 6:30 on this date, and I looked at my calendar. I put it in for 6:30 at night. I didn't dream that it was 6:30 in the morning, and I live about 40 miles from here, so I found out that the traffic is not at all bad at 6 o'clock in the morning. It reminds me, once I was introduced, I was a keynote speaker for an after-dinner speech, and I was sitting up at the head table with my host, and everyone's having this wonderful time, and the coffee comes, and the dessert comes, and dinner's over, and everyone's just having a great time, and pretty soon the hostess leans over and she says, "Well, Dr. Wilgenbusch, shall I introduce you now, or shall we continue to let people enjoy themselves?" It put a lot of pressure on me. Thank you. I'm going to do something I hope is going to be a little bit different this morning. Instead of just giving you a lecture about something, what I want to do is to tell you a story. And it's a true story, and it's a story that's got kind of three main characters in it that are real life people. Not that they're still alive, but they were live people. And these three people had an awful lot to do with the topic of today's conversation. I had to give them a title, and my title is something like "Giving of Your Substance, Not of Your Abundance, Living a Successful Life." And these three people taught me more about what that meant than any degree or any experience that I've been lucky enough to have. So what I want to do is, just in the few minutes that I have for a didactic presentation, is to tell you about those lives of those three people, and then maybe have some conversation with you and questions, and you tell me some things and like that. How does that sound to you? Okay, let me build a framework on this. So I'll tell you where I came from and how I was raised, and then I'm going to tell you about those three people that interfaced with my life and what they had to do with my life. I was born and raised one of 6 kids in a German Catholic farm family in the middle of Iowa. Now, the rest of my life, you should be able to just script out. In my family, the big things was faith, church, family, and work. And everything in my life built around those elements. The church was big, the family was everything, and work was an integral part of who you became and how you lived your life. And my father used to always say, "Nancy, all work is good." You know, there's no such thing as a job that's beneath you or that you shouldn't be doing. Okay, so grew up in this family, and I had the first mentor I had. I had 3. I'm going to talk about those 3, and those are the stories. The first mentor I had was my Aunt Irene. Now, I'm going to describe my Aunt Irene, and I wish you could just picture her in your head. Aunt Irene was also my godmother. In the Catholic Church, you had godparents. So if your parents died, they took care of you, and they were responsible for your soul, your spirit. So we take it very seriously in my family. So my Aunt Irene was my godmother, and her husband, Ollie, was my godfather. They had 7 kids of their own. And they lived about 2 miles north of my farm. They had a farm. But their farm was what we call a hardscrabble farm. Their farm was kind of built around ravines and rocks, and it was very, very poor. And they were a poor family. My father was lucky enough after World War II to go to school on the GI Bill, and he became a math teacher in the public school system. So we were farmers, and he was a math teacher. So we were a little bit better off. But Aunt Irene had these 7 kids in this hardscrabble farm. And they were raising all these kids. And Ollie died, my uncle died of cancer at an early age. So now she had this hardscrabble farm and 7 mouths to feed and kids to educate and 0 money. There were no safety nets back in those days, right? So here was this woman with this tremendous challenge left on her hands, right? Now, my Aunt Irene looked like she had Brillo pads for hair. I mean, she had hair that was indescribable. This hair stood up like, it was gray like steel on top of her head. And she had this smile. She smiled constantly, and she had brown teeth because she chain smoked Camel cigarettes, unfiltered ones. And she was a health food nut, even though she... And she carried around this concoction in a quart jar with a lid on the top of it. You know, like carrot juice and God knows what. You know, we always had big gardens and you made all this stuff. And so she swore that this was just the best stuff in the world for you. Well, she's smoking these cigarettes, go figure. Okay? She was one of the brightest people and one of the most giving people you'll ever know. Well, so Ollie died, now she's responsible for these kids. Now my father was kind of their uncle, not kind of, he was their uncle. And my father, they all looked up to my father, who was bigger than life, and we'll talk about him in a minute. And they emulated themselves after my father, and they wanted to go to college. Well, how are you going to go to college when you have to run this farm? And he's got the boys of this family are out there trying to run this farm, trying to keep it all together so the bank wouldn't take the farm away. So my Aunt Irene kept this family together out of sheer will, never had any money. And when these kids graduated, Dad said, you have to go to college. They got scholarships and they went to college. And you could go down to her house and there's an oilcloth on this table. And Aunt Irene was writing their dissertations. She was doing the work because the guys were out in the fields. So she got 1 through 2 Ph.D s, 2 master's degrees, all of them college educated. And I swear, don't tell anybody, but I swear she wrote every paper they ever submitted. Because these guys were out in the fields trying to work, doing this thing together. My Aunt Irene, she sold this thing, sold the farm when the kids left, and she took the money and she went into town and she ran a home for disabled veterans. She'd get her Social Security check and she'd sign it over to the missionaries in Africa. This woman never spent a cent that I saw. She didn't need anything. She was the most unfettered person, great woman of amazing faith, but what she taught me was, you don't need anything. And her successful life was a life she lived being totally other-oriented. She gave it away. She needed nothing. And what she always kept telling me was, Nancy, she says, stay hollow. I said, what are you talking about? What do you mean stay hollow? She said, if you don't stay hollow, in other words, if you gump up your life with having to have things or needing things or complexities, then you can't let love flow through you like an empty tube. She says, love comes here, it comes through you, you add some more, and it goes out. That's a successful life, she says. You don't have it like a bag where love goes in and you keep it, but you have to stay hollow. Give it away. Don't encumber your life or your soul. Now, what she did was when she retired and she was living in this little town, she went over to the college and she says, I'm going to volunteer, but you have to let me sit in on all your classes. So she would go to this private university there in town, and she would sew on the letters on their jerseys, you know, like football jerseys and stuff, and they'd let her sit in the classes. So you could see my Aunt Irene in the back of a philosophy class, and she'd be back there putting on these letters in this class of young 18-year-olds, and she'd be listening to all this philosophy stuff. And then she started writing letters to the governor and bugged him until he allowed the state penitentiary to serve milk more than once a week. And she would just rail on this governor. She'd say, how can we be in Iowa and produce, and she had all the statistics, of course, of how many gallons of milk we produce and how many cows and da-da-da, and yet you don't let the guys in the penitentiary have milk only once a week. She thought that was outrageous. Today they get all the milk they want in the penitentiary, thanks to my Aunt Irene. So Aunt Irene was a woman of tremendous faith, and I'm going to leave her with just an example of what she didn't need. You know, they were so poor. I remember her coming down to visit us, you know, and they played pitch in those days on the farm. Or you'd go up to church with Aunt Irene, you'd see her drive in. Never had a car that ever had any brakes, to my knowledge. So when you saw Aunt Irene coming, you had to make sure you were uphill from her. Because she never saw the need to pay money to fix a brake. When the brakes were gone on a car, she would just, to stop a car, she'd roll it into something. When it stopped, she would get out. So when Aunt Irene came down the farm to visit us, she would roll it into a fence post, or she'd roll it into another car. She wasn't picky. She'd roll it into hay bales. She'd roll it into the pig pen. Didn't make any difference, but when it stopped, then she got out, and she would come in all smiles, like this is a normal way to live one's life. Okay. Wonderful, wonderful woman. Okay, what she taught me then, just to summarize her life, what she taught me was to stay hollow don't need anything, and that's success. Because the extent to which we are needy for this world, we are not so greased for the next one, okay? Woman of great faith. The second mentor that just terribly powerful in my life was my father, who was Aunt Irene's younger brother. Both of my parents were, but I'm going to separate them out because Mom and Dad were very different and had different impact, and I don't have time to do that, so I'm going to just pick on my father for a minute. My father was this guy, amazing brains, bigger than life guy, big, tall, handsome, aggressive, assertive kind of a guy. And he was so smart that people from all around this farming community would come, and at night I could sit there and watch him at this big kitchen table. People would come in and ask him things. You know, they'd say, well, Tom, should I take out this life insurance policy? And my dad would read the fine print, and he'd, you know, figure out time value of money, and he'd give them a lecture about, you know, if this is a good investment or not, you know, and they'd go off. And then they'd come, they'd say, Tom, I'm looking at buying this piece of land, you know, and the guy's wanting X amount of money for it. Is it a good investment? Or somebody would come and they were having troubles with this and that. My father was this great kind of a mentor to a lot of the people, especially the younger people around there. But my father told me stories only when I got older. You know, up until I was about 18, it was all, you know, like, do your job, go to school. Then, you know, that was the kind of the conversation you had with my father. When I got older, and you could sit down, you know, and have a cup of coffee or have a drink with him, then the whole thing changed. And it was wonderful as I got older to really understand what this guy was like when he was younger, and, you know, more than just go to church, work, take care of things, don't pollute the air, you know, that kind of thing. So one of the first things he told me when I was 18, I'll never forget it, he said, Nancy, he started talking about falling in love with my mother. And he said, Nancy, I was so in love with your mother. He said, and she was a looker. He said, I saw your mother. They were seniors in high school or something, and she just moved in. He said, I took one look at your mother and I was just gone. I was just totally in love with her. And he said, kind of winked, and he said, and I thought that if I could ever sleep with her, I would faint from pure pleasure. Now, 6 kids later, he obviously didn't do a lot of fainting, right? They got married, lived forever together, you know, wonderful marriage. But then he said, I loved her so much that when we got married, and they went 7 years without the first child, he said, all of a sudden, your mom was pregnant with the baby. And his big fear, he said, was that he loved mother so much that he would have no love left over for the baby. So the baby would come, he said, and he was afraid that he couldn't love this baby because he loved mom so much. And I'm just looking at him like going, are you nuts? You know? And he said, but you know, that baby came. Oh, and I loved that baby so much and your mother so much, I was just beside myself. He said, then she got pregnant again. And he thought, I'll never have enough love for the second baby and the first baby and your mother. The point of the story is, he said, love just multiplies. All you have to do is just play the game. Get into life, live it, love it, and it multiplies. So that was lesson number 1. You can't love too much. You can't love too much. The other thing he taught me was, because he was a man of great passions, and he just loved life and he loved people and everything. But he told me, he said, Nancy, he said, as you are an adult and you're out doing your thing, he said, your passions, your core, whatever you really care about, are going to run your life. They're going to direct your life. So he said, make sure that you build a life, the structure of your life, in such a way that it protects and empowers your morality and your ethics. Don't live a life or construct a life that dallies with or endangers your morality. Isn't that an interesting thing? How many of us think about that? So we, collective we, you and I, and individually, think we know what our core values are and our ethics are and our faith is, but do we construct a life that protects that? Which I thought was a very interesting thing. The last thing I'll leave about my father although there's a lot of stories I could tell you about. But I'll tell you one, because not only was he a man of great passion and great faith, I mean, this is the Lenten season, right? And when I grew up, the Lenten season was something one dreaded, because we took it very seriously. And you suffered during Lent. You know, Easter was a joyous time for us, because during Lent, I mean, you didn't eat meat and you didn't eat candy and you prayed on the rosary on your knees every night. I mean, Lent was an important season. So this is a nice time to be here for me. But I'll tell you one thing, in addition to the, in addition to the faith that Dad had, which was just an amazing faith in Christ, but the work thing was integrated into that whole thing. You know, there's a poet that says, work is love made visible. Isn't that great? That when you work, it's an opportunity for you to love and to be out here doing things and all of that. Work is love made visible. My dad really kind of believed that, and that was one of the major things he taught us. But I'm going to tell you a story. I was about 9 at the time, and we all had to work on the farm. And there were 3 girls and 3 boys. And there were 2 girls and then a boy, then me, then 2 boys. Okay. So the 2 girls stayed in the house and helped my mother. The next boy went outside, worked on the farm with my father. Then I came along, and I could either go inside because I was a girl, I could go outside because there was only one out there. My mother didn't want me inside very badly. I was kind of hyper, and so I went outside. And so I grew up driving tractors and doing all that kind of thing with my father. And one day, when I was about 9, it was around November, and it was really bad, you know, just a hint of snow in the air, and it was that cold, you know, wet wind blowing, and we were trying to get the corn in before the winter snows all hit the corn, so we were shuttling corn back and forth. And so we had several farms, and there was a farm that had the corn on it, with a corn picker guy picking the corn and putting them in big wagons. And then my job was a shuttle wagon person. My job was to drive my little tractor carrying these big loads of corn all around the roads back to the elevator, where they'd be dumped in this elevator and taken up and dumped into the corn bin. With me? That's all I did all day, was drive this little tractor back and forth. I'd take a full wagon to the elevator and an empty wagon back and get a new wagon, and that's what I did all day. It was the last load of the day. And I'm driving my little tractor, and I've got my youngest brother was sitting on the fender of the tractor, and I got this great big flare box behind me filled with corn. And flare box comes up like this, and it flares out like this, and it's just chock-a-block filled with this beautiful golden corn, okay? And I'm just beelining it. I got that gas up, and I can't wait to go home, and I'm freezing to death. And I'm coming down this big hill, and it's a gravel road. I'm coming down this big hill, and I hear this noise behind me. A car's behind me. I can hear him in the gravel, and I pull my tractor over out of the way, and down come past me is my wagon. It disconnected. Underneath the tongue, between the tongue and the wagon, sheared off. And now my wagon is loose. And it's coming behind me down this big hill. And I've got this little tractor, and I'm dying, you know, because in my family, if you took a tractor out and you were responsible for an outfit, in other words, a tractor and an implement of some sort, a plow, a harrow, or something, you had to bring it back. You didn't take it out and get it stuck and then walk home and say, Dad, I got my tractor stuck. If you took the responsibility for your outfit, you had to get your outfit back, short of death. No other excuse. You were either dead or you brought your outfit back. So you're very careful what you did with your machinery. And now my wagon is loose. And my life is passing in front of my eyes. So I'm thinking really quickly, it's like it was yesterday, how to stop that wagon from going off the road, you know. So I thought, well, if I just pull my tractor over in front of this big wagon, I could slow it down. The only trouble with that is your wheels go this way, and it would pick that wagon up and crush me and my brother. So I thought, that probably not smart. So the only other thing to do was just let it go. There was no way to stop this wagon, which now had a life of its own. It was picking up speed, and it was heavy. And it was picking up speed just going, and pretty soon it went right past me, faster than the tractor was going, and then it started veering over to the side of the road. And wouldn't you know, it picked the deepest part of that ditch to go off in. It was like, you know, the cowboy shows, when the horses get away from the stagecoach and the stagecoach goes flying over the cliff. That's what this looked like. I was heartbroken. That thing hit that thing and went down that ditch, and it went, and those 2 sets of wheels come smashing in together, and it ripped that great big wagon in 2 and dumped all that corn in the neighbor's field and wrecked his fence. So there I am. I got my little tractor, and I'm pulling the tongue behind me like some forlorn little critter, you know. And I'm just crying and sobbing. I got tears. I mean, they're freezing on my face. I'm crying, and I'm driving this. I got to drive it all the way around to this elevator where my dad is, right? I'm, oh, geez, I'm going to get killed. So I'm driving this tractor, and I get over there, and I pull up in front of my father, and he's standing there with his hands on his hips. He's not saying a word. And I'm just crying and blubbering, you know, and the wagon and this, and it wasn't my fault, and it's down in the ditch, you know, and I'm crying, you know, and he's standing there, he's not saying anything. And so then all of a sudden he clears his voice and he says, okay. He said, what are you going to do about it? Isn't that fabulous? Isn't that fabulous? Think about it. I'm 9 years old. I've been out there all day. Wouldn't your inclination as a father be, oh, honey, don't cry, not your fault. Go in and have some hot chocolate and a cookie. You shouldn't have been out here anyway. This is all my fault. You're too little to do it in the first place. Can't you just picture that? He didn't do that. It was so empowering. It was the best single sentence said to me in my lifetime is, so what are you going to do about it? Think of what that means to you when you're 9. You say, oh my God, it is my wagon. I'm not in trouble. It wasn't my fault. But I'm still responsible. So go take care of your wagon. So that was my father. The last person, then I'll shut up and let you just ask questions or make fun of what I've said, is Sister Vera. Now, picture me 17, I go off to become a nurse. Because in 1965, when I graduated from high school, if you were where I was from, you became a nurse or a teacher if you went to college at all. And I had one sister that was a nurse and one that was a teacher. And so I flipped a coin and came up heads, and I became a nurse. And so I went off to nurses training. And I was 17, and we were taught by nuns. And I walk in the first day of nurses training, and here is this nun, and she's big. She's a big Missouri farm girl turned nun. She's young. She's about 25, fully professed, gone, you know, all her vows and everything. She was a full-fledged nun. She was dressed in all in white habit from head to toe, and all you could see is just this much of her face. And now she's responsible for me and the rest of my friends, but she picked on me. I mean, she separated me out from others and helped me more, not in terms of academics, but in terms of my faith walk. And I don't know if she knew that I needed help or if she just kind of liked me because we were farm girls or something. But she spent a lot of time with me offline, talking to me about faith and about faith issues. And she was a woman of astounding faith. And she, of course, when you're 17, well, I don't know, maybe you weren't when you were 17, but when you're, you know, when I was going through those time period, you're questioning your faith and how to live your life and all that kind of thing. And she just stuck with me like tick on a dog. I mean, this woman was all over me. She kept giving me things to read and making sure I was going to church. And she was really, really formative during that college time frame. Well, Sister Vera, she went on with her life and her career, and she went into a housing ministry. And she spent the next 30 years of her life, she just passed away 2 years ago, but she spent 30 years of her life dealing with the ministry around people who need homes and underhoused and all this. And she worked in the slums a lot. And she would always zing me with these. She was a woman of very few words. And when she talked, when she spoke, I listened. And she said two things that have stuck with me all these years. And she did it early on. She said, Nancy, she said, the single most important thing you ever need to ask yourself and answer for yourself is this question: is there life after death? You answer that, and it forms the rest of your life. So that was question number one. The second thing she told me is the title of today's talk. She said, and she told me this way later in my life. I mean, I'd gone on with my career and done all these things. And she would say to me, now, Nancy, remember that you have to be giving of your substance, not of your abundance. Give of your substance, not of your abundance. And what does that mean? That means you give till it hurts. That means you get involved. That means you're doing things that's not just convenient or comfortable or affordable, but you are living a life that is not only faith-filled, but that is gut-wrenching giving, other-oriented. That's what she taught me. And clear until her death, she was zinging me with all these things about, you know, I felt like I was 12 every time I talked to her. She was so filled with the understanding of what a life well lived meant. So when people talk to me about success, these are the kinds of thoughts that run through my head. It's not what you do, how much money you have, what kind of car you drive, obviously. It's, have you lived a life that's been well lived? Have you walked your faith? Are you living out your passions for other people? Are you staying hollow? You know, do you have brakes in your car? Those kinds of things. Okay? I'm going to stop, answer questions. Those are just from my rambling thoughts of this morning.
What happened with the wagon?
This is what happened with the wagon. I didn't have to do anything that night. It was too dark. And the next day was school. Okay? So it took about 5 nights after school where I went down with another wagon and a tractor and 5-gallon buckets, and I corralled every cousin and brother and sister and anybody on 2 legs that could help go up and down that grader ditch, and we put all that corn, each and every ear, into 5-gallon buckets and hiked them up that grader ditch, dumped them in another wagon until every piece of corn was out of there, and then we repaired the fence. And then the last thing we did was drag that hulk out of there and take it, I don't know where my dad took it, but someplace. So I had some help picking up that corn, but it was my job, and I had to muster I had to call in some chits to get that done. There was questions or comments?
Yeah, I really like your comments about staying hollow, because I'm obviously from India and I follow the Buddhist philosophy, and I've taken some meditation courses. And that says the same thing. You know, they come with a different wording. If you want to be happy in your life, don't want to carry any sorrow and all, so be detached to this world. And I think it's the same translation to the same word, stay hollow, so that things can flow and you don't have sort of it. Because you are bound to lose things. And you have come to the world, you are bound to lose or gain things. The sorrows come when you sort of lose things. And if you stay hollow or don't have attachment to worldly affairs, then you will never reach.
Very Gandhi-like, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to comment a similar thing as well, because I was raised Catholic and I recently took a class on Buddhism, and I really enjoyed as I was listening to discussions in that class and seeing kind of the similarities in the messages and things like that. So yeah.
That's great. That's good. Yes?
You spoke a lot about, I was actually raised very similar to you, Italian Catholic farm.
Oh, yes.
The 6 kids, the whole deal. And it's interesting because, can you talk a little bit about, when you told a story about your dad and what he said to you about what he did to fix it, I don't think most parents today would talk to their kids that way. I think they would talk this latter way. Can you talk a little bit about sort of that cultural move of sort of over-coddling kids? That's a judgment, my part to say that. But I mean, it's just a cultural move that, there's pluses and minuses. But how you've seen that, how do you see that reflected in like the attitudes of the students that come in to the university, and over the years, you've been there many years, have you seen a big shift that sort of come from sort of cultural move about, I don't think we sort of give kids as much sort of empowerment as you did like in your life growing up?
That's a very good question. I get asked that or something similar to that quite often. I think that one of the differences is the agrarian society. I mean, when you were on the farm, you were purposeful. You had a meaning. When I was 4, I had 12 geese, and they were mine to take care of. And when I was 5, I had 100 chickens. And they were mine to take care of, mine. So I could identify at an early age with something meaningful. They needed the chickens. We ate them. We needed the geese. We ate them too. I mean, on the farm, you ate everything. Yeah. But the difference is, I think, that the trouble today in an urban society is there's no meaningful work for kids. It is not very meaningful to make your bed and take out the trash. I'm sorry, it's just been hard to get high on that, you know. So I think there's a cultural movement as we moved off of farms and into the city. But also, within the city thing, you still have to hold people responsible. I have an adopted daughter and an adopted son that I got when they were older. She came to live with me when she was 16, my daughter. She's now 25 and doing fine, thank you very much. But she was a terror at age 16. Smart, and a terrible driver. And she was always running into, she'd go reach down to get something and crash into a gate. How can you do that? She said, well, I was trying to look in my backpack. I said, not when you're driving. You know, stop the car, then look into your backpack. You know, so she kept, you know, little accidents here and there. I had to say, you're paying for them. So all of your paychecks for an entire summer, she had to give to me. It broke my heart. I don't need her money. It broke my heart, but I had to make her responsible for it. I said, you have to give me every paycheck, every one of them, until that dent is paid off. You know, so those are, you know, and those are the kinds of things, and also role modeling, you know. So your kids are looking at you and they say, mom's going to work, she's up, she's doing this, she's doing that, you know, she's taking responsibility for this. Kids at all ages watch us as role models. And you can say anything you want, but they're watching us. And they know the difference between us talking or walking the talk, you know. They know the difference. And so responsibility, do I take responsibility, and do my kids see me take responsibility for things? I mean, do I, you know, they often said, well, Nancy, why do you go to work so early? You're the president. I said, that's why I go to work so early, because I'm the president. Don't you get it? My car should be the first one there. And they're just looking at me like, what are you talking about? If you're the boss, you don't have to go in early. You know, and so I've had a lifetime of being able to tell these kids, if you're the boss, then you have more responsibility than everybody else, and you have to be there early. They need to see your car when they come in. So the only people that ever beat me to the university are the housekeepers. They come in at 5 o'clock, and I have to draw a line someplace, you know. They're not coming in at 4:30, I'm sorry. You know, so it's role modeling, and it's trying to work within an urban culture of finding ways to say to the kids, so what are you going to do about it? You know, so they come to you and they say, Mom, you know, can you give me an advance? I spent all my money ahead of time, and I can't go to the dance, and it's a big dance, so what are you going to do about it? Instead of, here's the money. It's really hard. You got to sit on your hands and just keep saying to yourself and to others, what are you going to do about it? So when they grow up, they take responsibility like that. So I think there's two things. One is this movement, it's more difficult to be purposeful, and it's that we want to be nice to our kids, and that's not always the best thing to bail them out.
Nancy, you've been very modest. Maybe you might tell us what you've done at Marylhurst. I know there's some trouble when you came there and changed your direction, and you've done a tremendous job out there. But you all being very involved in the community. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about it.
Well, thank you, Clarice, for that. Clarice and I go back a long time, probably 1985 or something, served on the chamber board together. Well, I was recruited out of the Midwest to come to take Marylhurst University. We're celebrating our 113th year today, so it's been around a long time. But it was a Catholic women's college up until '74, and then it changed to a co-ed college, essentially, for lifelong learning, which meant that we were teaching adults. So most of our students live off campus, and they come and they take our professional programs and our liberal arts programs. But when I came in 1984, they had undergone some real financial crunches. And I was 36 at the time. And I thought, I can do this. That's not a big deal. It's just a little college, you know. So I was sitting in my office, and the grounds were terrible. And I come from Iowa, where we mow everything. I mean, everything in Iowa looks just spiffed. And I thought, gosh, look at the grass. It's dreadful. You know, it's not mowed, and there's weeds. So I called in the groundsman. That should have been a hint. We had one groundsman for 70 acres. So I call him in, and I'm just giving him the right act. I said, gosh, I said, look at this place. It's dreadful. You need to be doing something. Why aren't we mowing the ground? He didn't say anything, and finally he said, well, President, I have no lawnmowers. I have no rakes. I have no grass seed. I have no fertilizer. We can't afford this, and we can't afford that. So he says, you go get me all that stuff, and I'll make your grass look better. And I thought to myself, I am really in deep here. And so it was a matter of just slowly making sure that the fundamentals are done, which meant don't spend more than you bank. We have no debt. We've never had any debt in the 22 years I've been there. We don't borrow money because I don't like it. I don't like to borrow money. I don't want to be in debt. That's something I got from the farm. So we just raise a little money, fix it. Raise a little money, fix it, you know. Better students, better curriculum, stay true to your core, and we've been successful. So we've tripled enrollment and built a small endowment and have wonderful students and wonderful faculty, and by many measures successful, but we have a long way to go. I mean, haven't been able to achieve what I think I should have been able to in 22 years, but they haven't closed us down. We're there, we're in the black and moving. As to my involvement in the community, I serve on 5 corporate boards and I serve on 5 not-for-profit boards. And I'm very involved in making those help each other. And the university tries to leverage the university into the community. And we do this very intentionally. And I think that universities, my industry, universities and higher ed ought to be taken to the woodshed for our collective isolation from the real world. And I can say that because I'm in it. So what Marylhurst tries to do is break down those barriers. We try to take the university out to the community in a lot of ways. So we're involved with the women's shelters in Clackamas County. We're involved with Goodwill. We're involved with Head Start. We're involved with poor K-5 inner city grade school. We're involved with the whole food thing. We're involved with a lot of those kinds of issues. I personally am involved. I give my time on their boards and I give my money to them. And then we leverage the university in addition to that to try to help. On the corporate side, I serve on West Coast Bank Board and Cascade Corp, which is materials handling kinds of things. I serve on ScottishPower's board, which owns PacificCorp, which is just selling that now to Mid-American. If you're paying attention to that, that's a UK-based headquartered board and a couple other smaller boards. So what I try to do is learn from them and then make sure that my voice on those corporate boards, my voice is heard around, especially the people that are employees, safety issues, you know, women's issues, minority issues, that kind of thing. So that's my contribution.
Tell us something about what you're doing intentionally about succession planning.
At the university?
Build your core values into somebody else. How are you doing that at the university?
Hire carefully. I hire very carefully at the university. And if you walk on our campus, and I think this is one of our greatest strengths, you walk on our campus, there's a certain sameness about the people that you meet. They're all other-oriented. They're all bright as anything. They care deeply about the people that they're serving. They are all servant leaders. I don't have to talk about that. That's who we hire. And succession, I could be run over today. That university will be just fine and dandy. But they're centered people. That's an excellent question. They're centered. You can't blow them over. You can't scare them. You know, they know who they are. They're people of faith. They are people with great relationships, you know, with their wives and their husbands and everything. And that you can't spook them and you can't go boo and they run away. You know, they're just solid. Excellent question. You had a question.
When you running for governor?
I don't think he's chasing me off.
Yeah.
One more question.
One more.
Let me give you a little perspective to my question. About 10 years ago, there was a movie called Mr. Holland's Opus. It was really about the Portland area schools and the problems that we have. This problem that that movie was about, how we fund education and stuff, is still with us today, giving you perspective on this crisis that they keep talking about. So we have this funding issue that seems to be a cultural issue. How do we get around this? You know, how do we fix this problem? And that, you know, they complain that they don't have enough money, but they never fix to get that money. It seems like they don't want to do the things to really move forward and get us out of this crisis. And just your perspective on that, and you know.
Okay, can I answer this? Okay, give me just, because I chair an advisory committee for a small poor grade school inner city. Okay, so I'm familiar with it, not from a policy wonking, but from the student perspective. But just understand that I'm not a K-12 expert, but here's what I see. and I've told people this, there's a we and they. There's the teachers' union and the teachers individually care deeply about their students. Collectively, they care deeply about their benefit package, which we can't afford. And it eats up a tremendous amount of the resources that you put into the district. And it's not that they're overpaid, it's that the benefits are a chain and a drag on this system. So what I think has to happen is we and they, the unions, have to come forward and say, we're going to put this on the table. In other words, we're going to voluntarily do this with our benefits. If you, the public, will help us get the money that we need to run this district. Most districts are helped out with sales tax, and we don't have any. So that's number one. That'll probably never get passed here, but that's insane. Start there. So we need more money, but to break down the barriers of distrust, the teachers' union is going to have to come back. To be a part of the solution, they're going to have to come back and put something on the table, and then we're going to have to, as a public, put something on the table, because I think that all of us would support our schools. We would vote for whatever we need to have done there if we believed that that money was going to go where it ought to go. But the issue is not the teacher. The teachers care deeply. It's the system in which the teachers, the embedded context of the teachers. So that would be my message, and it's been my message for a long time.